Hi, I'm Emily. I'll be your storyteller today. Many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Also, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable. Close your eyes and let the sound of the rain guide you into the story. The late autumn rain had been a constant companion for weeks. A mournful gray curtain drawn across the historic sprawl of Oakhaven. As an archivist, I was accustomed to the scent of damp paper and time, but this persistent deluge had seeped into the very stones of the city, making even my familiar walk home feel like a passage through a forgotten, waterlogged era. Tonight, a thick, cloying fog was beginning to roll in from the river, swallowing the gaslit street lamps one by one, and a familiar sense of being adrift, of being untethered in my own life, clung to me like the damp chill in the air. My work at the city archives often kept me late, surrounded by the brittle ghosts of Oakhaven's past. Tonight was no exception. As I finally locked up, the usual muted sounds of the city, distant traffic, the chime of the old cathedral clock, were strangely muffled, absorbed by the encroaching white silence of the fog. It swirled around my ankles as I stepped onto the slick cobblestones, its tendrils cold and inquisitive, blurring the edges of reality, transforming familiar landmarks into ghostly, uncertain shapes that loomed and then receded with each step. The fog was unusually dense, even for Oakhaven, which had a reputation for such autumnal visitations. It had a peculiar, almost metallic scent, different from the usual damp earthiness, and it seemed to possess a strange, internal luminescence, a milky glow that distorted perspectives and played tricks with the faint, surviving light from shop windows. My usual route home, a labyrinth of narrow alleyways and quiet residential squares I knew by heart, felt suddenly alien, each turn an uncertain venture into a landscape rapidly losing its definition. I found myself hesitating at corners I'd navigated countless times, the familiar contours of buildings dissolving into an amorphous, shifting whiteness. The silence, too, was unnerving. The city's pulse seemed to have stopped, replaced by the soft, insidious whisper of the mist itself, a sound like 1,000 tiny, secretive breaths. It was on one such corner, a place where I was certain a familiar old bakery should have stood, its warm, yeasty scent a beacon that the world seemed to subtly tilt on its axis. Instead of the bakery's reassuring facade, a narrow, unfamiliar street opened before me, emerging from the dense fog as if it had been painted into existence only moments before. It was cobblestoned, the stones slick and glistening in the eerie ambient glow, and lined on both sides with tall, narrow houses I had never seen. Their architecture was quaint, old-fashioned, with steeply pitched roofs and small-paned dark windows, some of which held the faintest flickering suggestion of candlelight within, a stark contrast to the surrounding known city, an inexplicable chill, deeper than the damp November air, traced its way down my spine. This street simply wasn't here. I knew this intersection, this precise spot, as well as I knew my own name. I had walked past it hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. There had never been a street here, never these silent, watchful houses. My archivist's mind, trained to catalog, to map, to understand the ordered layers of the past, rebelled against this sudden, impossible intrusion into the known geography of Oakhaven. A strange, almost magnetic pull emanated from the mouth of the unknown lane, a silent invitation into its misty depths. It was absurd, impossible, yet I felt a profound, almost unnerving curiosity, a desire to step onto those unfamiliar cobblestones, to discover what lay hidden in that luminous, swirling fog. The silence from the street was absolute, a stark contrast to even the muted sounds of the surrounding city, as if it existed in its own separate, soundless bubble. I took a few hesitant steps closer, peering down its length. The houses, perhaps a dozen on each side, seemed perfectly preserved, their paintwork faded but intact, their brass door knockers gleaming dully. Yet, there was an unnerving stillness about them, a sense of being uninhabited, or perhaps inhabited by something other than the living. No smoke curled from the chimneys, no curtains twitched, no sound of life escaped their tightly closed doors, save for those faint, flickering candlelights that seemed more spectral than real. A small flurry of sparrows, dark shapes against the glowing mist, suddenly darted from the eaves of one of the houses, their wings making no sound as they vanished back into the fog. It was an odd detail, sparrows active so late on such a night, and their silence was even stranger. The name Sparrowood, lane unbiddenly formed in my mind, a whimsical label for such an unsettling apparition. The pull to explore, to understand this anomaly, warred with a primal instinct to turn and flee. The air on Sparrowood Lane, as I tentatively breathed it in from its threshold, carried that same faint metallic tang I'd noticed in the denser fog. But here it was mingled with a subtle, almost unidentifiable sweetness, like long-dead flowers pressed between the pages of an ancient book. The houses, though charming in their antique design, seemed to lean inwards ever so slightly, as if sharing secrets, their dark windows like eyes watching me with a patient, ancient scrutiny. It felt less like a street and more like a carefully set stage. Then, a faint sound reached me from within the nearest house, the one with the faded blue door. A delicate, melancholic melody played on what sounded like a spinet or an old harpsichord. It was a simple, haunting tune, filled with an almost unbearable sense of longing. The music, so unexpected, so out of place, was both an allure and a warning, a siren song emanating from the heart of the impossible. It seemed to beckon me forward, promising what? Solace? Understanding? Or something far more insidious? Just as I was contemplating another step, a sudden, inexplicable wave of dizziness washed over me. The edges of the misty street blurring, the faint candlelight in the windows seeming to pulse and sway. I stumbled back, my hand reaching out for the familiar solid brickwork of the building that should have been there, finding only the cold, swirling emptiness of the fog where the entrance to Sparrowood Lane had been moments before. It was as if the street itself had recoiled, or I had been subtly repelled. Shaken, I retreated from the corner, my heart hammering against my ribs. Had I imagined it? Had the fog, my fatigue, and my overactive imagination conspired to create such a vivid, detailed hallucination? Yet the memory of the cobblestones, the silent sparrows, the melancholic music from the blue house, felt undeniably real, imprinted on my senses with a startling clarity that defied easy dismissal. The city around me, as I stumbled back onto more familiar, if still fog-shrouded streets, now felt subtly altered, less certain. A few blocks further on, seeking some anchor to reality, I noticed a dim light emanating from the small, cluttered window of an old antiquarian bookshop I rarely saw open, especially at this late hour. Blackwood's Books and Curiosities, the faded sign above the door proclaimed. Impulsively, needing some human contact, some rational explanation, however faint, I pushed open the door, a small bell tinkling merrily, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of the misty night outside. in the impossible street I had just witnessed. The shop was a labyrinth of towering, teetering stacks of books, ancient maps, and strange, unidentifiable artifacts, all bathed in the warm, amber glow of a single, low-hanging oil lamp. Behind a massive, book-laden counter, an elderly man with a cascade of white beard and spectacles perched precariously on his nose looked up. His eyes, magnified by the lenses, surprisingly bright and alert. He had an air of timeless wisdom, as if he were as much a fixture of this shop as the dusty tomes surrounding him. "Lost, my dear?" he asked, his voice a dry, rustling sound, like turning pages. Or perhaps, "You found something you weren't looking for?" His gaze was unnervingly perceptive. I hesitated, unsure how to even begin to describe what I had seen, fearing he would dismiss me as mad. The scent of old paper, beeswax, and something faintly spicy, like dried herbs, filled the air, a comforting, grounding aroma after the metallic tang of the fog. I thought I saw a street," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "Just off Oakhaven Square. One I've never seen before. Cobblestones, old houses. It was there, and then it wasn't." The old bookseller stroked his beard thoughtfully, a faint, enigmatic smile playing on his lips. He didn't look surprised, nor did he offer any immediate denial. Instead, he seemed to be considering my words with a grave, almost solemn interest that both reassured and unsettled me further. "Ah," he murmured, his bright eyes glinting. The mist does play tricks on weary eyes, especially on nights like these, when the veil between worlds is thin. Oakhaven is an old city, child, filled with forgotten pathways and echoes of things that once were, or perhaps things that still are, in their own fashion. Some lanes, they say, only appear to those who are receptive, or to those who are, perhaps, a little lost themselves. His words, so calm, so accepting of the impossible, sent a fresh shiver down my spine. He wasn't dismissing it. He was almost confirming its plausibility within the city's hidden lore. "Phantom lanes?" I whispered, the term feeling both ludicrous and terrifyingly apt. The shopkeeper nodded slowly. "Or memory lanes, some call them. Streets that emerge from the mist, filled with houses that hold more than just timber and stone. Houses that remember, houses that wait." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush, the earlier warmth in his eyes now tinged with a subtle, unmistakable warning. "Be wary of such places, child. They are alluring, these misty streets, for they often seem to offer precisely what one feels is missing. But their welcome can be possessive. Not all who wander down such phantom lanes find their way back easily, especially when the rain begins to call them home to houses that do not truly exist." The old bookseller's cryptic words about phantom lanes and possessive welcomes echoed in my mind for days, a disquieting counterpoint to the mundane rhythm of my archival work. Every time the rain softened to mist, or the evening fog rolled in from the river, my heart would quicken with a mixture of dread and an undeniable, illicit thrill. The memory of that impossible street, with its silent houses and flickering candlelight, was a persistent, alluring itch beneath my skin. A mystery I felt increasingly compelled to solve, despite the inherent warning. I began to actively seek it out, altering my homeward route on misty evenings, lingering near Oakhaven Square with a feigned nonchalance, my senses straining for any sign of its ethereal presence. My archival instincts kicked in too. I spent fruitless hours poring over Antiquated city maps and forgotten borough records, searching for any mention, any hint, of a lost street in that specific vicinity. There was nothing, of course. It was as if Sparrowood Lane, for the name had firmly taken root in my thoughts after another fleeting glimpse of those silent, unnervingly graceful sparrows near its supposed entrance, existed only in the mutable landscape of the fog, or perhaps only in my own increasingly suggestible mind. Several times, my vigilance was rewarded. As the mist thickened to the perfect opaque consistency, and the city sounds became hushed and distant, Sparrowood Lane would coalesce from the white void, its cobblestones gleaming wetly, its quaint houses exuding that same silent, melancholic invitation. The faint, sweet scent of long-dead flowers would drift from its opening, mingling with the metallic tang of the fog. I would stand at the threshold, a silent observer, the bookseller's warning a cold hand on my shoulder, holding me back from stepping across that invisible boundary into its alluring depths. The lights within the windows of Sparrowood Lanes. Houses were always soft, always flickering, suggesting warmth and life. Yet the silence that emanated from the street was profound, almost reverent. It was a silence that seemed to absorb sound, to swallow the distant, muffled noises of Oakhaven, creating an enclave of preternatural stillness. There were never any clear figures visible behind those glowing panes, only the occasional fleeting shadow, the suggestion of movement too quick for the eye to truly register, adding to the street's ghostly, uninhabited charm. On one particularly raw, misty evening, as I watched from the concealing shadows of a familiar archway, I saw him, a tall, stooped figure in a long, dark coat, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, emerging from the deeper city fog. He paused at the entrance to Sparrowood Lane, his posture radiating a profound weariness, a sense of being utterly lost. He looked up and down the normal, bustling street I stood upon, then turned his gaze towards the phantom lane, his hesitation palpable even from a distance. For a long moment, he simply stood there, a solitary silhouette against the luminous mist, seemingly wrestling with an internal debate. Then, with a slow, almost reluctant deliberateness, he took a step onto Sparrowood Lane's cobblestones, then another, and then he was swallowed by the swirling fog and the silent, beckoning houses. I waited, my breath held, expecting him to re-emerge, to have simply taken a shortcut. But he never did. The street remained silent, its secrets held close. A few nights later, under similar misty conditions, I saw another figure, this time a young woman, her shoulders hunched against the damp chill, her face pale and etched with a quiet sorrow. She too paused at the threshold, her gaze fixed on the soft lights within the houses, a look of desperate longing in her eyes. Like the man before her, after a period of intense, visible hesitation, she succumbed to the street's silent allure and stepped into the mist, vanishing from my sight as if she had never been. These observations filled me with a growing unease. Sparrowood Lane was not just a fleeting architectural anomaly. It was a destination, a place that drew the lost, the sorrowful, the searching, and it seemed, ominously, to be a one-way passage. The allure of the street, its promise of something indefinable, was undeniably potent, yet the fate of those who entered its embrace remained a terrifying, unanswered question. My own longing to understand, to explore, was now tinged with a more personal, chilling fear. One morning, after a night when the fog had been particularly dense and Sparrowood Lane had felt almost palpably present at the edge of my perception, I was drawn back to the corner of Oakhaven Square. The sun was struggling to burn through the receding mist, the air cold and clean. The phantom street, of course, was gone. The familiar old bakery standing in its rightful place, its windows steamy, its warm, yeasty scent, a comforting reassurance of normality. Yet something glinted on the damp pavement near the curb. I bent down and picked it up. It was a small mother-of-pearl button, intricately carved with a tiny, almost invisible floral design, its luster dimmed by age and dampness. It was undeniably old, perhaps Victorian, and utterly out of place on this busy city street. It lay exactly where the threshold of Sparrowood Lane would have been, a tangible relic from an intangible place, a tiny, insistent whisper of its reality. My fingers closed around its cool smoothness, a thrill of discovery mixed with a profound disquiet. Holding the antique button, I felt a new layer of obsession settle upon me. This was proof, however small, however ambiguous. Sparrowood Lane was more than just a trick of the fog or a figment of my imagination. It left traces. It interacted with the world. Later that day, at the archives, I found myself describing my research into forgotten city lanes to Arthur, a senior colleague known for his sharp intellect and even sharper skepticism, hoping perhaps for some rational historical explanation. Arthur listened patiently, his expression carefully neutral as I spoke of misty apparitions and streets not on any map, though I carefully omitted the more fantastical details of what I felt I had witnessed. I even showed him the mother-of-pearl button, suggesting it might be a clue to a lost Victorian alleyway. He examined it briefly, a faint, almost imperceptible frown creasing his brow for a fleeting moment before his usual dismissive composure returned. It was a flicker so quick, I almost doubted I'd seen it. "Evelyn," he said, his voice tinged with a familiar, weary condescension. "This city is ancient. Lost buttons are hardly an archaeological sensation. And the fogs here are notorious for playing tricks on the mind, especially a mind as imaginative as yours, surrounded as you are by dusty relics of the past." He handed the button back, his smile patronizing. "Stick to the documented archives, my dear. Chasing phantoms will lead you nowhere but to distraction." His dismissal, though expected, stung. Yet, that momentary flicker of something else in his eyes, had it been recognition, unease, or merely impatience, fueled a stubborn spark of defiance within me. He might call them phantoms, but the allure of Sparrowood Lane, the mystery of its silent houses and vanishing visitors, felt more real, more compelling than any dusty document in the archives. His skepticism, perversely, only strengthened my resolve. The mother-of-pearl button felt cool and smooth in my pocket, a secret talisman. Arthur's words, meant to dissuade, instead acted as a goad. If Sparrowood Lane was a phantom, it was one I needed to understand. The other figures I had seen, drawn into its misty embrace, had looked so lost, so hopeful, so much like myself in those unguarded moments of quiet desperation. Their unknown fates tugged at me with an unexpected empathy. The next few days were a torment of waiting. I scanned the weather forecast with an almost feverish intensity, yearning for the precise conditions, the chilling rain, the enveloping mist, that seemed to be the key to Sparrowood Lane's emergence. The city's normal routines, my work at the archive, all felt like a pale imitation of reality, a mundane distraction from the true, compelling mystery that lay hidden just beyond the veil of the ordinary. I found myself tracing the intricate, floral pattern on the mother-of-pearl button with my fingertip, over and over again, as if it held some secret code, some map to the street's elusive heart. The image of the softly lit windows, the faint melancholic music I'd once heard. the silent, watchful sparrows. These details became an almost constant preoccupation, a siren song luring me towards an unknown, perhaps perilous shore. The bookseller's warning about possessive welcomes and streets that don't let you return easily echoed in the deeper recesses of my mind, a counterpoint to the street's magnetic pull. But even that cautionary note was losing its power against the burgeoning weight of my obsession, against the tantalizing promise of discovering something utterly unique, something hidden from the mundane, everyday world. The desire to not just observe, but to experience Sparrowood Lane, to step onto its cobblestones and breathe its strange, scented air, was becoming an almost physical ache. The fear was still there, a cold knot of apprehension, but it was increasingly overshadowed by a relentless, consuming curiosity. What secrets did those silent houses hold? Who were the figures who vanished within them? And what, truly, was the nature of this street that emerged only when the world was veiled in mist and rain? The next time the fog rolled in, thick and luminous, and the rain began its soft, persistent whisper against the city's ancient stones, I knew I would not just watch from afar. The allure of the unfamiliar was too strong, the beckoning too insistent. Armed with little more than a racing heart, the old bookseller's ambiguous warning, and a single antique mother-of-pearl button, I would answer Sparrowood Lane's silent call. My vigil was over. My journey into its mystery was about to begin. The night arrived draped in its familiar shroud of fine, persistent rain, and a thick, pearlescent mist that clung to the city like a damp shroud. My anticipation was a tight knot in my chest, a mixture of fear and an almost unbearable excitement. Tonight I wouldn't just observe Sparrowood Lane, I would answer its silent, enigmatic call. The mother-of-pearl button felt cool against my palm, a fragile key to an impossible realm, as I made my way towards Oakhaven Square. My every sense attuned to the subtle shifts in the atmosphere. There it was. As I rounded the familiar corner, the mundane architecture of the city dissolved, and Sparrowood Lane materialized from the luminous white breath of the fog, its cobblestones gleaming, its quaint houses huddled together like ancient, slumbering secrets. The air here was different, hushed, carrying the faint, sweet scent of damp earth and something uniquely floral, almost like night-blooming jasmine, a fragrance entirely alien to Oakhaven's usual autumnal palette. The cacophony of the city faded. Behind me, replaced by a profound, preternatural quiet. Each step onto the cobblestones felt like a transgression, a deliberate crossing into a forbidden space. The mist swirled around my ankles, cool and caressing, muffling the sound of my own cautious footsteps. The silence was broken only by the soft, rhythmic drip of moisture from unseen eaves, and the distant, almost inaudible sigh of the wind as it navigated the narrow, winding lane. The houses on either side stood silent and watchful, their darkened windows like closed eyes guarding forgotten dreams. My gaze, however, was drawn irresistibly to one particular house on the left-hand side, about halfway down the lane. It was painted a faded, melancholic blue, the color of a twilight sky just after a storm, its paint peeling gently in places, revealing the dark, weathered wood beneath. A single warm light glowed from an upper window, a solitary beacon in the misty gloom, and its front door, a sturdy oak panel, was enticingly, almost deliberately, ajar by a few inches. A faint, delicate melody, the same haunting tune I had heard once before, drifted from the narrow opening of the blue house's door, the sound of a spinet, perhaps, or a virginal, playing a simple, poignant air that spoke of longing and lost chances. It was an irresistible siren song, pulling at something, deep within me, a resonance with my own unacknowledged sorrows. I felt a profound, almost painful urge to approach, to seek the source of that beautiful, melancholic music. As I moved slowly towards the blue house, my heart a nervous flutter, I became aware of another presence on the street. Further down, near a wrought iron lamppost that shed a feeble, misty glow, stood an elderly man. He was wrapped in a heavy, dark cloak, a wide-brimmed hat obscuring his features, and he held a large leather-bound sketchbook, seemingly oblivious to the damp, his attention utterly captivated by the facade of one of the houses opposite him, his charcoal pencil moving slowly across a page. He looked up as I approached, his eyes, when they met mine, surprisingly clear and sharp, filled with a gentle, knowing wistfulness. He was an artist, I surmised, drawn like me to the strange, ephemeral beauty of this impossible place. His presence, though unexpected, was not immediately alarming. He seemed almost a natural fixture of Sparrowood Lane, as ancient and enigmatic as the street itself. The rain had softened to a mere breath, a damp caress on the air. "It has a way of calling to certain souls, doesn't it?" he said, his voice soft, a little reedy, like the rustle of dry leaves. He gestured with his charcoal towards the houses, each one a little world, a little dream, waiting for someone to step inside and listen to its particular silence or its particular song. His smile was faint, a little sad, as if he understood the street's allure all too well, and perhaps its potential deceptions. "They say," he continued, his gaze drifting towards the blue house, then back to me, "that you find what you've truly lost on Sparrowood Lane. Or perhaps," he added, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow, "it is what has lost you that finds its way home here, seeking a final quiet acknowledgement before fading completely into the mist." His words, so poetic, so laden with a gentle melancholy, resonated deeply with the unformed longings and regrets that had led me to this strange, rain-kissed threshold. I found my voice, though it was barely a whisper. "And what have you found? Here?" I asked, gesturing towards his sketchbook. He chuckled softly, a dry, papery sound. "Only echoes, my dear. Echoes of beauty, echoes of sorrow. I try to capture their fading light before the mist reclaims them entirely. But they are shy creatures, these houses, these memories. They reveal themselves slowly, and only to those who approach with a patient, understanding heart." His gaze then fixed on the blue house, a strange intensity in his clear eyes. "That one," he murmured, "sings a particularly sad song tonight. A song of waiting, I think, of a door left open for a return that never quite happens." He sighed, a sound that seemed to merge with the soft dripping of the mist. "Be careful what you seek within these walls, child. Sometimes the most beautiful melodies are also the most ensnaring." With a final enigmatic nod, the elderly artist turned back to his sketchbook, his attention once more absorbed by the silent, watchful houses, leaving me alone before the blue house and its gently ajar door. His words, part warning, part wistful observation, hung in the damp air, further deepening the mystery, further fueling the strange mixture of trepidation and irresistible curiosity that churned within me. The faint, melancholic music from within seemed to swell slightly, a soft, insistent beckoning. I stood there for a long moment, the preternatural quiet of Sparrowood Lane pressing in around me, the mist swirling like an expectant breath. The choice was stark, to retreat back to the mundane, fog-shrouded reality of Oakhaven, forever haunted by the what-if, or to step across this threshold, into the heart of the enigma, into the house that sang of waiting. The allure of the unknown, the promise of uncovering a secret hidden from the everyday world, was a potent, almost intoxicating force. The memory of the other figures I had seen vanish into these houses, their faces etched with a similar blend of hope and sorrow, flashed through my mind. Were they still within, lost in some beautiful, ensnaring dream, as the artist had hinted? Or had they found what they were looking for? The pull of the music, the soft glow from the upper window, the slightly open door. It all felt like a personal invitation, a scene set just for me. My hand, seemingly of its own volition, reached out towards the cool, damp wood of the blue door. The mother-of-pearl button in my pocket felt warm against my skin, a tiny, pulsing ember. I pushed the door inward just a fraction more. It swung open silently, smoothly, revealing not darkness, but a dimly lit hallway, and the source of the music, now clearer, more poignant than ever. A wave of dizziness, the same I'd felt before, washed over me, but this time I resisted the urge to retreat. The air that drifted out from the house was warm, carrying the scent of beeswax, dried lavender, and a faint, almost heartbreakingly familiar aroma of baking apples, a scent I hadn't encountered since my earliest childhood, from a time long lost to memory. It was a scent of home, of safety, of a deep, uncomplicated happiness. How could such a place, such an aroma, exist on this impossible, mist-shrouded street? My breath caught in my throat. The bookseller's warning, the artist's gentle caution, they both faded against the overwhelming sensory pull of this house, against the promise of something lost, something precious, perhaps waiting just beyond that threshold. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a deeper, more primal yearning, a need to step into that warmth, to follow that scent, to understand the source of that beautiful, sorrowful music. The decision, when it came, felt less like a conscious choice and more like an inevitable surrender. With my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a counterpoint to the spinet's delicate melody, I took a deep breath, the scent of lavender and baked apples filling my lungs, and stepped forward, across the worn wooden threshold, out of the misty quiet of Sparrowood Lane, and into the waiting silence of the blue house. What met my eyes was not what I expected. The hallway was narrow, papered in a faded floral design, and at its end, a graceful wooden staircase curved upwards into shadow. But it was the quality of the silence that struck me most, a silence that seemed to absorb the music even as it played, a silence that felt alive, watchful. And from the top of the stairs, a single soft whisper, like a rustle of silk, seemed to breathe my own name. The door to Sparrowood Lane clicked softly shut behind me, the sound definitive, like a lock engaging. I was inside. The scent of apples and lavender was stronger here, almost cloying, and the melancholic music from the spinet seemed to wrap around me like a silken embrace. The whisper from the top of the stairs came again, closer this time, a breathy, almost longing sigh. Evelyn, you've come home at last. The adventure, or perhaps the entrapment, had truly begun. The soft click of the door sealing behind me was a sound of utter finality, severing me from Sparrowood Lane's misty embrace and plunging me into the heart of the blue house's enigmatic silence. The whispered invocation of my name. Evelyn, you've come home at last. still hung in the warm, fragrant air. A greeting both longed for and deeply unnerving. The scent of baked apples and dried lavender was intoxicating, wrapping around me like a comforting, long-forgotten memory, while the delicate spinet music seemed to draw me further into the house's depths. I moved cautiously down the narrow hallway, my hand trailing along the faded floral wallpaper. It led into a parlor, bathed in the soft, warm glow of what appeared to be flickering gaslight from ornate wall sconces. The room was exquisitely furnished, polished mahogany tables, chairs upholstered in rich, patterned velvet, a grand fireplace with a low, inviting fire already burning merrily in its grate, though I had seen no smoke from outside. Every detail was perfect, immaculate, yet possessed an unnerving, museum-like stillness, as if time itself had been suspended within these walls. On a small, inlaid table beside a plush armchair, a delicate porcelain teacup sat beside a silver teapot, a wisp of steam still curling from its spout, as if someone had just poured a cup and momentarily stepped away. A book lay open on the chair, its pages filled with elegant, spidery script. It was a scene of perfect domestic tranquility, yet there was no sign of the room's occupant, no sound other than the crackling fire and the distant, poignant melody of the spinet. As I explored further, venturing into a cozy, book-lined study, the feeling that this house was somehow attuned to me, to my deepest unspoken longings, grew stronger. The shelves were filled not just with books, but with precisely the kind of rare manuscripts and historical treatises I, as an archivist, dreamt of discovering. A large antique globe stood in one corner, and on a beautifully carved desk lay a collection of cartography tools, as if inviting me to chart forgotten lands, or, perhaps, the hidden territories of my own heart. It was a scholar's paradise, a haven of quiet contemplation and intellectual pursuit, a perfect escape from the feelings of stagnation and unfulfillment that had recently plagued my professional life. The scent of old leather bindings and beeswax mingled with the persistent, comforting aroma of apples and lavender, creating an atmosphere so perfectly tailored to my sensibilities it felt almost dreamlike. Yet, this very perfection, this uncanny resonance with my own soul, began to prickle at the edges of my awareness with a subtle, growing unease. In what appeared to be a dining room, a table was set for one, a single plate, a crystal glass, a silver knife and fork. A solitary apple, gleaming red and perfect, sat in the center of the plate. Again, the scene suggested an imminent arrival, a meal about to be enjoyed. But the silence, the utter stillness, remained unbroken. The only movement was the dance of the firelight on the polished silverware. The only sound the distant, melancholic strains of the spinet. It was on a small writing desk in a sunroom, though how sunlight could penetrate the dense fog of Sparrowood Lane was a mystery in itself, that I found the first truly unsettling piece of evidence. A sheet of elegant cream stationery lay there, a letter half written in a graceful, feminine hand. "My dearest," it began, "I fear the street will not let me leave. The house is so beautiful it offers everything I thought I wanted. But the silence is..." The ink trailed off, a single dark blot marring the page, as if the writer had been suddenly, inexplicably interrupted. A chill traced its way down my spine, despite the room's warmth. The half-finished letter, the cold teacup, the single place setting. They were not signs of life, but of lives interrupted, of hopes vanished. This house wasn't just a preserved dream. It was a repository of them, a beautiful, silent trap. that lured people in with the promise of their deepest desires, only to, what? Keep them? Absorb them? The spinet music seemed to take on a more sorrowful, cautionary tone. I noticed the pervasive scent of apples and lavender seemed to cling most strongly to these abandoned moments, these tableaux of interrupted lives. It was no longer comforting, but cloying, almost funereal. Was this the scent of contentment, or the scent of capture? The house felt less like a haven now, and more like a beautifully crafted cage, its bars invisible, its allure the bait. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was watchful, expectant. Then, as I stood by the writing desk, my fingers hovering over the blotted, unfinished letter, it happened. For a fleeting, disorienting instant, the room around me shimmered. The scent of apples intensified almost, sickeningly, and I heard it. The distinct, unmistakable sound of a woman's soft, contented sigh, seeming to emanate from the very air beside me. It was followed by a whisper, so faint I almost missed it. It's perfect here. Always. The vision, or auditory hallucination, vanished as quickly as it came, leaving me trembling, my heart pounding. The room was silent again, the letter undisturbed, yet the echo of that sigh, that whisper of false contentment, chilled me to the bone. This house didn't just reflect desires, it seemed to actively pacify, to lull its occupants into a state of blissful, perhaps eternal inertia. The perfection was the prison. I backed away from the desk, a sudden, urgent need to escape this cloying, beautiful trap clawing at me. The house, however, seemed to resist. The spinet music, which had been a distant, melancholic backdrop, swelled in volume, its melody becoming more insistent, more seductive, trying to draw me back into its gentle, sorrowful embrace. The air grew warmer, the scent of lavender and apples almost overwhelmingly sweet, a soporific, drugging perfume. The light from the gas lamps seemed to brighten, casting a golden, inviting glow over the exquisitely furnished rooms, highlighting their beauty, their promise of comfort and peace. Every detail seemed to conspire to hold me, to soothe away my anxieties, to persuade me that this was where I belonged, that all my longings could be fulfilled within these silent, watchful walls. It was a subtle, insidious form of persuasion, far more dangerous than any overt threat. I felt a strange lethargy begin to creep over me, a desire to simply sink into one of the plush velvet armchairs, to listen to the beautiful music, to breathe in the comforting scents, to let the silence envelop me. The thought of my own unfulfilled ambitions, my archivist's dreams, now seemed distant, unimportant. Why strive? Why struggle? When such perfect, effortless contentment was offered here, within this house of vanished hopes. The mother of pearl, button in my pocket, suddenly felt intensely cold against my skin. A sharp, unexpected sensation that cut through the encroaching lethargy like a shard of ice. The coldness was a jolt, a reminder of the outside world, of the mystery of Sparrowood Lane itself, of the warnings I had received. It was a tiny anchor to my own will, my own identity, which this house was so subtly, so sweetly trying to erase. The alluring spell of the blue house fractured slightly. With a surge of adrenaline born of that sudden, chilling contact, I turned towards the hallway, towards the door through which I had entered. The music swelled again, pleading, a beautiful, heartbreaking lament. The scent of apples intensified, trying to pull me back. but the image of the unfinished letter, the cold teacup, the ghostly sigh of false contentment, these were now my talismans against the house's insidious charm. I reached the hallway, my steps quickening. The front door, which had clicked shut so definitively behind me, now seemed miles away, the corridor stretching, the floral wallpaper seeming to writhe subtly in the flickering gaslight. The house was actively resisting, using its atmosphere, its sensory allure, to try and keep me within its perfectly preserved, perfectly deadly embrace. I had to get out, back to the misty uncertainty of Sparrowood Lane. My hand closed around the cool brass of the doorknob, a small, solid point of reality in this house of deceptive dreams. I expected it to be locked, to offer resistance, but it turned easily. As I pulled the door open, the preternatural quiet of Sparrowood Lane, the scent of damp earth, and the faint metallic tang of the fog washed over me. A surprisingly welcome contrast to the cloying sweetness I was leaving behind. But as I prepared to step back onto the cobblestones, a new sound reached me from deeper within the blue house, from the top of the gracefully curving staircase that ascended into shadow. It wasn't the spinet music, nor a whispered name. It was a soft, distinct, and utterly heartbreaking sound. The sound of a child weeping inconsolably, a grief so profound it seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. The urge to flee warred with an equally powerful, newly awakened instinct to investigate, to understand the source of that terrible, childish sorrow. The house had offered me a false contentment, a beautiful trap, but now it seemed to be revealing another layer of its mystery, a deeper, more painful secret. Sparrowood Lane had many houses, many whispers, and it seemed the blue house had not yet finished with me. The sound of a child's inconsolable weeping, emanating from the shadowy upper reaches of the blue house, pierced through my lingering fear and the house's cloying, deceptive sweetness. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated grief, a stark contrast to the carefully constructed illusion of contentment I had just resisted. The front door still stood ajar, a dark invitation back into its depths. But the misty, silent expanse of Sparrowood Lane behind me offered its own uncertain perils and unanswered questions. My instinct to flee the blue house warred fiercely with an equally potent, newly awakened compassion, a need to understand the source of that childish sorrow. Could this be another layer of the house's intricate trap, designed to prey on a different kind of vulnerability? Or was it a genuine cry for help, a flicker of truth amidst the deceptions? The mist outside swirled, obscuring any easy answer. The lane itself a silent, enigmatic witness to my internal struggle. With a heavy heart, I made my choice. I couldn't ignore that sound. Yet rushing back into the blue house felt unwise, like walking willingly into a spider's parlor. Instead, I stepped fully back onto the cobblestones of Sparrowood Lane, pulling the blue house's door gently closed, muffling the sound of weeping only slightly. I needed to understand more about this street, its nature, before I confronted the specific sorrow held within that one house. The mist immediately felt cooler. The scents of the lane, damp earth and those faint, otherworldly florals, a stark contrast to the apples and lavender. Cautiously, I began to walk further down, Sparrowood Lane, away from the blue house. The preternatural quiet returned, broken only by my own hushed footsteps, and the incessant soft drip of moisture from the unseen rooftops. Each house I passed possessed its own distinct, subtle character, its own silent, beckoning allure. One, a dark timbered structure with ivy-covered walls, seemed to emanate a faint, scholarly scent of old parchment and ink, a soft golden light glowing from what looked like a library window. Another, painted a cheerful, though slightly faded yellow, had window boxes overflowing with ghostly pale flowers that seemed to shimmer in the mist. From within, I could almost hear the faint, joyful strains of a distant string quartet and the murmur of convivial laughter, promising warmth, companionship, and a life free of loneliness. It was as if each facade was a carefully crafted advertisement for a specific, deeply desired dream, a bespoke paradise tailored to some unspoken longing. The air grew colder as I progressed, the mist thickening, swirling around the ornate, silent lampposts that lined the lane, their gaslight-like flames burning with a steady, unwavering glow, despite the lack of any discernible fuel source. It was then, as I passed a particularly grand house with tall, arched windows and a heavy, carved oak door, that I saw him, a young man, his face pale and intense, his eyes shining with a fervent, almost feverish hope. He stood before the grand house much as I had stood before the blue one, his gaze fixed on its imposing facade. He clutched a worn leather portfolio to his chest, his knuckles white. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, with a sudden, almost desperate surge of movement, he strode forward, pushed open the massive oak door, and disappeared inside without a backward glance. The heavy door swung shut behind him with a soft, definitive thud, leaving the street once more to its silent, misty vigil. A profound sense of unease settled over me. I had witnessed another soul succumb to the street's silent summons, another life stepping willingly into an unknown, perhaps perilous embrace. Where did they go? What did they find within those silent, beckoning walls? The beauty of Sparrowood. Lane felt increasingly like a veneer, a beautiful, deceptive mask hiding something far more sinister beneath its charming, antique facade. The silence now felt less peaceful and more predatory. It was then that I noticed her, emerging from the swirling mist near a small, overgrown patch of what might once have been a garden, beside a house with dark, shuttered windows. She was an older woman, slender and upright, dressed in an elegant but distinctly old-fashioned gown of dark gray silk. Her silver hair was impeccably styled, and though her face was lined, her eyes were remarkably clear, holding a strange, timeless quality. Like polished agates, she moved with a quiet, graceful purpose, as if she belonged here, a permanent fixture of this ephemeral street. She carried a small, ornate watering can, and she proceeded to tend to a few struggling, ghostly white blooms that poked through the weeds in the patch of garden, her movements unhurried, almost ritualistic. She seemed entirely at ease in the misty silence, unperturbed by the street's strange nature or my sudden appearance. As she straightened up, she turned her calm, knowing gaze directly upon me, and a faint, enigmatic smile touched her lips. This, I sensed, was Mrs. Gable. The lane provides what is needed, though not always what is wanted in the end, she said, her voice soft and melodious, yet with an underlying resonance that seemed to vibrate in the misty air. It wasn't a greeting, nor a question, but a simple statement of fact, delivered with an air of serene, unshakable authority. She seemed to know who I was, why I was here, without me uttering a single word. They are beautiful, aren't they? She continued, gesturing with her watering can towards the silent, alluring houses that lined Sparrowood Lane. Each one a perfect little dream, a sanctuary for a searching heart. So many come here, looking for something they have lost, or something they have never quite managed to find in the harsher light of their own world. Her smile remained, but her eyes held a hint of something unreadable, perhaps pity, perhaps something far more ancient and detached. I finally found my voice, though it felt thin and reedy in the oppressive stillness. "What is this place, Sparrowood?" "Lane?" I asked, the name feeling strange on my tongue now that I had spoken it to another. "And these houses? Are they real?" Mrs. Gable's smile didn't waver. "Real?" she mused, tilting her head slightly. "Oh, they are as real as the desires that call them into being, my dear. As real as the hopes that furnish their rooms." Then, her expression shifted subtly, the gentle amusement in her eyes replaced by a flicker of something colder, more direct. "But be warned," she added, her voice losing some of its melodic softness. "These houses, they are particular. They welcome guests so warmly. They offer such perfect comfort. But they have a tendency, you see, to keep what they find most precious within their walls. They are not fond of farewells." Her words, delivered with such calm, almost gentle finality, sent a sliver of ice through my veins. This was no mere folklore, no vague warning from an old bookseller. This was a pronouncement from someone who knew, someone who was a part of this place. The beautiful, silent houses of Sparrowood Lane were not just illusions. They were possessive. They were traps, designed to lure and to hold. The mist around us seemed to thicken, to press in, suddenly feeling less like a veil and more like the silken threads of a vast, intricate web. Mrs. Gable regarded me for another long moment, her agate eyes seeming to pierce through my carefully constructed composure, reading the fear that I knew must be starkly visible on my face. "The blue house," she said softly, her gaze flicking towards it, then back to me. "It weeps for a reason. Some losses are too deep to ever be truly silent, even here." Her words confirmed the sorrow I had sensed, the childish grief I had heard, grounding it in a chilling, undeniable reality. The weight of Sparrowood Lane, with its countless doors leading to countless bespoke dreams and potential entrapments, settled upon me with a crushing force. Each silent house was a potential prison, each soft light a lure. The faint, sweet scents were the perfume of oblivion, the gentle music a lullaby for lost souls. And Mrs. Gable, with her serene smile and her ancient eyes, was its calm, knowing custodian, perhaps even its gatekeeper. She then turned back to her ghostly white blooms, her movements once again unhurried, as if our conversation had been a mere interlude in her timeless duties. "Be careful what you open, child," she murmured, without looking at me. "Some doors, once passed, can never truly be found again from the other side." Her final words were a soft, chilling echo in the swirling mist, leaving me alone once more on the silent cobblestone street. The allure of Sparrowood Lane had now transformed into something far more menacing. The mystery was no longer just a curiosity to be unraveled, but a palpable threat. A labyrinth of beautiful deceptions where every inviting doorway could lead to an eternity of lost hopes. The faint, lingering echo of the child's weeping from the blue house now felt like a desperate plea, not just for comfort, but perhaps for rescue. A plea I was increasingly unsure I was equipped to answer, or even survive. Mrs. Gable's chilling pronouncement about doors that cannot be reopened echoed in the swirling mist of Sparrowood Lane, solidifying my fear into a cold, hard certainty. The charming facades of the houses now seemed like predatory masks, their soft lights the lures of anglerfish in an ocean of fog. The faint, distant echo of the child's weeping from the blue house served as a constant, mournful reminder of the street's possessive nature, a sorrow I felt increasingly entangled with, yet powerless to address directly. I knew I couldn't leave Sparrowood Lane yet, not without understanding more. Not while that heartbreaking sound persisted, however faintly. Driven by a grim determination, I turned my attention away from the overtly beckoning houses and towards one that stood further back, almost hidden in a deeper recess of the mist. It was plainer than the others, its windows dark and shuttered, its paint a nondescript gray, giving it an air of quiet, forgotten sorrow, a place less of active allure and more of passive accumulation. The front door of this gray house was stiff, resisting my touch, but it yielded with a protesting groan of old wood, opening into an atmosphere thick with the scent of dust, decaying paper, and a profound, almost suffocating stillness. There was no welcoming warmth here, no enticing music or familiar aromas, only a heavy silence and the palpable weight of countless forgotten moments. The air itself felt old, each particle saturated with the residue of lives unlived and stories unfinished. Inside, room after room was filled not with furniture arranged for living, but with an astonishing, overwhelming collection of personal belongings. Shelves overflowed with faded, leather-bound diaries and bundles of letters tied with brittle ribbon. Tables were laden with tarnished silver lockets, children's worn-out toys, single gloves, spectacles with cracked lenses, and countless other small, intimate trinkets. It was a museum of lost souls, a silent testament to all who had been drawn into Sparrowood Lane's embrace and had left a piece of themselves behind. Each object pulsed with a faint, residual energy, a whisper of the life it had once been part of. I picked up a small porcelain doll with one button eye missing. A wave of childish laughter, followed by a sharp pang of fear, washed over me. I touched a collection of pressed flowers in a book and felt a fleeting moment of romantic hope, quickly soured by an almost unbearable sense of subsequent betrayal. These were not just things. They were crystallized emotions, fragments of dreams and despairs. The sheer volume of these remnants was staggering, suggesting that Sparrowood Lane had been claiming its visitors for a very, very long time. Each item told a silent, incomplete story of someone lured by a specific promise, a bespoke dream crafted by one of the other houses on this street. The promise of love, of success, of peace, of family, only to have that dream curdle, leaving behind these pathetic, poignant tokens of their vanished hopes. As I stood amidst this silent chorus of lost lives, a soft rustle of silk made me turn. Mrs. Gable was there, standing in the doorway of the room, her expression calm, her agate eyes surveying the collection with a strange, almost proprietary air. She had appeared as silently as the mist itself, her presence both expected and deeply unsettling in this mausoleum of forgotten dreams. The watering can was gone, replaced by a soft feather duster she held loosely in one hand. "Every object here has a voice, if one knows how to listen," she said softly, her gaze sweeping over the cluttered shelves. "They tell of the moment the dream met reality, or the moment the dream became the cage. I find it important to keep them, to remember them, even if their owners no longer can, or no longer wish to." Her words were gentle, yet they carried an undercurrent that I couldn't quite decipher. You collect these things?" I asked, the question sounding inadequate, almost absurd, given the scale of what surrounded us. "Are you their keeper?" Mrs. Gable smiled faintly. "One might say that." Or perhaps I am merely the lane's archivist, a curator of its many acquisitions. Sparrowood Lane offers much, but it also inevitably takes. These are the exchanges, the small prices paid for an eternity of what was once most desired. Her explanation did little to dispel the chill that had settled deep in my bones. Was she a benevolent preserver of memory, a gentle historian of lost souls? Or was she something more integral to the street's predatory nature, a tender of its grim harvest? The way she touched a small, tarnished silver music box, her fingers lingering on its surface, suggested a connection that went beyond mere curatorship. It felt like an almost symbiotic relationship. What happens to the people? I pressed, my voice hushed. The ones who owned these things? The ones who stepped into those houses and never came out? Mrs. Gable turned her calm, unnervingly serene gaze upon me. They find their desire, my dear, she said simply. And in finding it, they often lose themselves. The houses provide. The houses absorb. Their dreams become their reality, and their reality becomes the dream of the house. Her words painted a horrifying picture. A beautiful, eternal stagnation. A blissful unawareness of being utterly consumed. The houses weren't just traps. They were living entities, perhaps, feeding on the emotional energies, the very essence of those they lured within. And Mrs. Gable, with her calm demeanor and her feather duster, was the tender of these soul gardens, ensuring the exhibits remained undisturbed. I thought of the child weeping in the blue house. Was that sound a remnant? An echo of a soul not yet fully absorbed, still fighting against the blissful oblivion? And if someone wants to leave? I asked, the question a desperate plea for my own uncertain future on this street. If the dream becomes a nightmare? Mrs. Gable's smile was tinged with a profound ancient sadness. Sparrowood Lane is not fond of farewells, she repeated her earlier warning. The mist has a way of holding on to what it loves. The sheer passivity of her role, if it was indeed passive, was terrifying. She spoke of these consumed lives with a detached, almost academic sorrow, as if they were interesting specimens rather than individuals who had suffered a terrible eternal fate. The ambiguity of her nature deepened, shifting from a gentle, enigmatic resident to something far more unsettling, a knowing accomplice, perhaps, or even an agent of the street itself, her kindness a carefully crafted lure. I looked around at the countless trinkets, each representing a life subsumed, a hope extinguished. The air in the gray house felt thick with their silent screams, their unfulfilled longings, their eternal quiet despair. This was the true heart of Sparrowood Lane, not the alluring facades, but this silent, dusty repository of what remained after the dreams had faded and the mist had claimed its due. Mrs. Gable watched me, her expression unreadable. Each house offers a unique perfection, Evelyn, she said, her voice a soft, silken whisper, using my name again, reminding me of her uncanny knowledge, and each soul seeks its own. The blue house, for instance. It has been waiting a very long time for someone who understands the particular melody of its sorrow. Someone like you, perhaps, who feels the ache of a bond broken too soon. Her words were a subtle, chilling invitation, a suggestion that my own specific longing, my own vulnerability, had already been identified, catalogued, and a bespoke trap prepared. The weeping child was not just a random sorrow. It was a call meant for me, a hook baited with my deepest sympathies. The collector of lost things was not just showing me her collection. She was showing me my potential future. I had to get out of this house, away from her calm, knowing gaze, away from the suffocating weight of these countless lost lives. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on Mrs. Gable, who simply watched me with that faint, enigmatic smile. "The mist is patient, Evelyn," she murmured as I reached the doorway. "It always gets what it desires in the end." Her voice was the last thing I heard as I stumbled back out into the swirling, indifferent fog of Sparrowood Lane. Mrs. Gable's parting words, "The mist is patient. It always gets what it desires," clung to me like the cold, swirling tendrils of Sparrowood Lane itself. I stumbled away from the gray house, the repository of lost things, my mind reeling with the implications of her calm, chilling pronouncements. The houses, once alluring mysteries, now felt like elaborate, sentient traps, their soft lights the predatory gleam in an anglerfish's eye, the faint, distant sound of a child's weeping, still emanating from the blue house, now carried an even more desperate, ominous weight. It was no longer a question of whether the street was real, but what kind of horrifying reality it represented. The beautiful facades, the bespoke dreams offered within, they were not gifts, but bait. The houses, I now understood with a sickening certainty, were psychic constructs, feeding on the intense emotional energies of those they lured inside. They drew upon the deepest longings, the most painful regrets, weaving them into perfect, inescapable illusions, leaving the occupants as empty, contented husks, their true selves slowly, surely, being consumed. As this horrifying realization solidified, the very atmosphere of Sparrowood Lane seemed to shift, to grow more menacing. The mist, always thick, began to coalesce into an almost tangible, suffocating blanket, reducing visibility to mere inches. It swirled with an unnatural, deliberate motion, pressing in on me, its metallic tang sharper, its silence now laden with 1,000 unheard, hungry whispers. The charming lane had transformed into a disorienting, claustrophobic labyrinth, its gentle curves now feeling like the coils of some enormous, unseen serpent. My sense of direction vanished. The familiar landmarks of the street, the blue house, the gray house, the lampposts, dissolved into the impenetrable white, reappearing and then vanishing again, as if the lane itself were rearranging its features to confuse me, to keep me trapped within its misty confines. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of my composure. I was lost, truly lost, not just in a physical space, but in a place that seemed to actively prey on the mind. The whispers within the mist grew louder, closer, no longer just the sighing of the fog, but sibilant, almost articulate sounds too, faint to decipher yet carrying an undeniable intelligence, a chilling awareness of my presence, my fear. I felt unseen eyes upon me, the collective gaze of the street, of its hidden inhabitants, of whatever malevolent consciousness governed this ephemeral predatory realm. The air grew heavy, making each breath a conscious, labored effort, as if the mist itself were trying to suffocate me. It was then, as I pressed myself against the cold, damp wall of an unseen house, trying to regain my bearings, that the vision struck, more vivid, more terrifying than any before. The charming facade of the house beside me flickered like a faulty projection, and for a horrifying instant, I saw behind it not a cozy interior, but a desolate gray void, cold and empty as a forgotten tomb. And within that void, I glimpsed a single spectral figure, a young woman, her face a mask of serene, blissful emptiness, as her essence seemed to visibly drain away into the surrounding nothingness. the illusion snapped back into place, the charming facade solid once more, but the image of that blissful, draining emptiness was seared into my mind. This was the truth behind the allure. The ultimate fate of those who surrendered to Sparrowood Lane's promises. They were not merely trapped in a dream. They were being hollowed out, their very souls becoming nourishment for this parasitic street, their discarded emotions and memories curated by Mrs. Gable in that grim gray house. I stumbled away from the wall, a choked sob escaping my lips. My own carefully catalogued longings, my unspoken regrets. They were not just vulnerabilities here. They were bait. The street knew them. It had been subtly probing, assessing, since the moment I first stepped onto its cobblestones. The blue house, with its scent of apples and lavender, its scholar's study, the sound of a weeping child. It was a bespoke trap, perfectly designed for me. Through a momentary parting in the now choking mist, I saw a familiar stooped figure. The elderly artist I had met earlier. He was huddled near a lamppost, his sketchbook fallen to the ground, his face ashen, his clear eyes now clouded with a dawning, uncomprehending terror. He looked directly at me, a silent, desperate plea in his gaze. Before the mist swirled again, thicker than ever, and he was gone, as if he too were being absorbed. His fleeting, terrified expression confirmed my worst fears. He hadn't been a wise old observer. He was another victim, his fascination with the street's echoes slowly but surely drawing him into its embrace. His art perhaps another form of emotional currency for the lane. There was no gentle wisdom here, only a relentless, patient hunger. The brief sense of camaraderie I had felt with him now curdled into a shared sense of doom. The street seemed to understand my dawning comprehension, my growing terror. The whispers in the mist became more insistent, more personal, no longer just formless sounds, but fragments of my own thoughts, my own fears, spoken back to me in a chorus of seductive, chilling voices. "Stay, Evelyn," they seemed to sigh. "It's so peaceful here. All your longings fulfilled. No more struggle. Just rest." The pull towards the houses, towards the promise of an end to my anxieties, my sense of being adrift, was almost overwhelming. The vision of the blue house, with its comforting aromas and the faint, heartbreaking sound of Lily's weeping, resurfaced in my mind. No longer just an allure, but a specific, targeted summons. It knew my weaknesses, my deepest sympathies. It knew how to make me surrender. But the image of the blissful, empty woman, her soul draining away into the void, also burned bright. That was the true price of peace on Sparrowood Lane. It was the peace of oblivion, the contentment of the consumed. The street didn't just offer dreams. It feasted on the dreamers until nothing but a hollow shell remained, another trinket. For Mrs. Gable's collection, I had to fight. I had to resist. The knowledge of how the street operated, how it fed on emotion, on desire, was terrifying. But it was also, perhaps, a weapon. If it needed my longing, my hope, my sorrow, then perhaps the key was to deny it that nourishment, to starve it of the very essence it craved. But how did one starve a street made of mist and memory? The mist swirled again, and for a heart-stopping moment, the facade of the blue house solidified directly before me, its door slightly ajar, the scent of apples and lavender and the sound of a child's desolate weeping flooding my senses with an almost irresistible force. It was so close, so perfectly tailored to my deepest vulnerabilities, a direct, undeniable assault on my resolve. This was its true attack. I could feel the street probing, tasting my fear, my compassion, my weariness. It was trying to find the crack in my defenses, the point of surrender. The child's cries intensified, tearing at my heart, begging for comfort, for rescue. It was the ultimate lure, designed to bypass all rational thought, to appeal directly to the most fundamental, selfless parts of my nature. The image of the mother-of-pearl button flashed in my mind, a found object, a tangible piece of reality amidst these illusions. And then, the bookseller's words. Not all who wander down such phantom lanes find their way back easily. The choice was stark. Succumb to the heartbreakingly beautiful, sorrowful illusion, or find the strength to unmask the mist, to fight for my own existence against a street that preyed on hope itself. My hand closed around the button in my pocket, its cool, solid reality a small anchor in the swirling chaos. The weeping from the blue house was an agony, a temptation almost too great to bear. But I also remembered the empty eyes of the woman in my vision, a hollow shell. I would not become another lost thing for Mrs. Gable to dust and catalog. The street was a hunter, and I was its prey. It had shown me its beauty, its sorrow, its power. Now it was tightening its net, using my own heart against me. The deepening, secret of Sparrowood Lane was not just its existence, but its insatiable, parasitic hunger, and I was squarely in its sights. The only way out, I suspected, was through. The swirling mists of Sparrowood Lane felt colder now, more predatory, after my realization of its parasitic nature. My momentary defiance before the blue house, fueled by the image of the mother-of-pearl button, had been a small victory, but the street was far from defeated. It seemed to pulse with a silent, ancient hunger, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it would not let me go easily. The distant, sorrowful weeping I had heard before was now a faint, almost inaudible sigh, lost in the oppressive silence of the fog. As I stood trembling, trying to gather my thoughts, to find a path through this deceptive labyrinth, a new allure began to emanate from further down the lane. It was different from the blue house's call, more subtle, yet infinitely, more potent because it resonated with a longing I had buried so deep I had almost forgotten its existence. A soft golden light, warmer than any I had yet seen on Sparrowood Lane, spilled from the windows of a small ivy-covered cottage I hadn't noticed before, its stone chimney emitting the faintest, most inviting curl of wood smoke. The scent that reached me was not of apples or lavender, but of old, beloved books, a hint of cinnamon, and the unmistakable, comforting aroma of my grandmother's baking, a scent inextricably linked to the only period of true, uncomplicated happiness I had ever known as a child. Faintly, I could hear the sound of a crackling fire, and the low, gentle murmur of a kind voice reading aloud, a story I couldn't quite catch, but that filled me with an almost unbearable wave of nostalgia and peace. This was a deeper magic, a more insidious temptation. The blue house had offered an intellectual or emotional ideal, but this cottage, this sudden, unexpected manifestation, promised a return to a lost Eden, a healing of the oldest, most tender wounds of my heart. The pull towards it was immense, a physical ache in my chest, a yearning so profound it almost brought me to my knees. The mist seemed to part before it, creating an inviting pathway, the cobblestones themselves seeming to guide my reluctant feet. Just as I was about to succumb, to take that first, perhaps irrevocable step towards its welcoming door, Mrs. Gable materialized beside me, as silent and ethereal as the mist itself. Her expression was one of serene understanding. Her agate, eyes soft with a counterfeit sympathy. "Ah, Evelyn," she murmured, her voice like a silken caress. "You see, the lane always knows. It always provides what the heart truly, secretly craves. Why struggle against such perfect understanding, such perfect peace?" She gestured towards the cottage. "Imagine, no more loneliness, no more searching, just warmth, comfort, and the echoes of all you held dear, perfectly preserved. Forever. No more the harsh realities of your world, no more disappointments. Here, in this small corner of Sparrowood Lane, you can finally, truly be happy. Isn't that what you've always wanted deep down?" Her words were a potent balm, a dangerous lullaby for a weary, tormented soul. Her persuasion was terrifyingly effective. The promise of an end to my internal struggles, to the gnawing sense of being adrift, was almost too alluring to resist. My carefully constructed defenses, my intellectual understanding of the street's parasitic nature, began to crumble against this direct assault on my most vulnerable, childish desires. The image of the hollowed-out woman, the collection of lost trinkets, seemed distant, less real than the promise of that crackling fire and the scent of my grandmother's kitchen. I wavered, my will a fragile thing against such a potent bespoke enchantment. The mother-of-pearl button in my pocket felt small and insignificant, its cold reality a feeble counterpoint to the overwhelming warmth emanating from the cottage. Mrs. Gable watched me, her faint smile knowing, patient, like a spider, confident its prey would eventually stumble into the waiting web. This was the true test, the street's most powerful weapon, my own deepest, most cherished, and most vulnerable hope. Just as I was about to surrender, to let the comforting illusion claim me, the heavens seemed to rip open. The gentle, misty rain that had been a constant, soft presence on Sparrowood Lane transformed in an instant into a torrential, violent downpour. Wind howled through the narrow street with the fury of a banshee, tearing at the illusory facades of the houses, extinguishing the soft, inviting lights, and threatening to rip the very cobblestones from the earth. The sudden, cataclysmic shift in the weather was shocking, brutal. The inviting warmth of the cottage vanished, its golden light extinguished by the ferocity of the storm, its comforting scents washed away by the deluge. The mist, once luminous, was now a chaotic, churning, gray, shot through with blinding flashes of lightning that illuminated Sparrowood Lane in stark, terrifying relief, revealing its true underlying desolation. The charm stripped away to reveal the bone. Mrs. Gable herself seemed to recoil from the storm's fury, her serene composure momentarily fractured by a flicker of something akin to surprise or perhaps even a hint of fear, before she smoothed her expression back into its usual enigmatic calm. The rain hammered down, soaking me to the skin in seconds, each drop like an icy needle, a painful, clarifying shock to my senses, momentarily breaking the cottage's seductive spell. This storm felt different from the city's usual rains, different even from the earlier mist. It felt like a raw, elemental force, a wild, untamed power that Sparrowood Lane itself could not entirely control. Or perhaps a power that was an intrinsic part of its more violent, destructive cycle. The street, which had felt like a carefully curated illusion, now felt like a battleground, the elements themselves raging against its deceptive tranquility. Caught between the allure of the now darkened cottage, the insidious persuasion of Mrs. Gable, and the terrifying cleansing violence of the storm, I felt myself at a precipice. This was the point of no return. I could succumb to the remnants of the cottage's promise, seeking shelter even in a faded dream. Or I could embrace the storm's fury, its brutal honesty, and fight for something more real, however painful. The memory of the weeping child in the blue house, a sorrow that felt genuine, not manufactured, suddenly cut through my fear and confusion. That was a truth I had yet to confront, a mystery that demanded more than surrender to my own selfish longings. That small, persistent echo of another's pain was a lifeline back to a purpose beyond my own desire for comfort or escape. With a gasp, that was part terror, part a dawning, defiant resolve. I turned my back on the darkened, rain-lashed cottage and its broken promise. I would not be another lost thing in Mrs. Gable's collection, nor a contented prisoner in a gilded cage of my own making. The storm raged around me, a terrifying, chaotic force. But in its heart, I sensed not just destruction, but also the possibility of a terrible, necessary clarity. My decision was made, not for peace, not for happiness, but for truth. I would face the storm, I would face the street, and I would find out what lay at the heart of its mystery, what fueled its hunger, and what, if anything, could break its hold. The point of no return had been reached, and I had chosen not to retreat, nor to surrender, but to push forward into the very eye of Sparrowood Lane's tempestuous, deceptive soul. The path ahead was obscured by the torrential rain and the swirling, angry mist, but my focus was singular now. Mrs. Gable watched me, her expression unreadable in the dim, storm-tossed light as I began to walk, not towards any beckoning house, but deeper down the lane, towards whatever lay at its core, towards the source of its power and its sorrow. The wind shrieked my name, or perhaps it was just the storm, but I did not falter. The ground beneath my feet was slick, the cobblestones treacherous, each flash of lightning revealing a world dissolving into chaos. The charming facades of the houses seemed to waver, to distort, their inviting lights flickering like dying embers. Sparrowood Lane was showing its teeth, its true, untamed nature unleashed by the storm, or perhaps by my own defiance. And I, drenched and terrified but resolute, walked on to meet it. My boots slipped on the treacherous, rain-slicked cobblestones as I pressed deeper into the raging heart of Sparrowood Lane. The charming facades of the houses were now grotesque parodies in the strobing, violent flashes of lightning, their welcoming, lights either extinguished or flickering with a malevolent, hungry intensity. The wind shrieked like 1,000 tormented souls, tearing at my clothes, trying to rip the very breath from my lungs. Yet, within me, a cold, hard core of resolve had formed, an archivist's determination to unearth the truth, however terrible. I had to understand its mechanism, its source. If Sparrowood Lane fed on desire, on emotion, then its power must have a locus, a heart. My fingers instinctively sought the mother-of-pearl button in my pocket. It was strangely warm now, almost vibrating faintly, a sensation I hadn't noticed amidst the chaos until this moment of focused intent. Perhaps this small, forgotten object, a relic of the street itself, could guide me, or offer some protection against the illusions. The storm's fury, while terrifying, was also revealing. Under the relentless assault of wind and rain, the very fabric of Sparrowood Lane seemed to be fraying at the edges. I saw sections of illusory brickwork flicker and dissolve, revealing glimpses of a churning, empty void beyond. The ornate lampposts wavered like mirages. The street was not a solid construct, but a desperate, ongoing projection, its integrity failing under the elemental onslaught, and perhaps under the weight of its own accumulated sorrows. It was near, what I perceived to be the center of the lane, where the mist swirled with a particularly disorienting luminous intensity that the storm's violence yielded its most significant clue. A particularly savage gust of wind, accompanied by a deafening crack of thunder, tore away a large section of the facade from a grand, imposing townhouse. For a horrifying instant, I saw not an interior, but a pulsating dark core of what looked like tangled roots or veins, throbbing with a sickly, unnatural light, before the illusion snapped back, though visibly weaker now. That brief, terrible glimpse felt like staring into the street's very heart, its parasitic engine. This was no mere collection of ghostly echoes. It was a living, feeding entity, its roots sunk deep into the desires of those it ensnared. The mother-of-pearl button in my hand grew hotter, its vibration more insistent, as if resonating with that exposed core. And then, as if summoned by this revelation, Mrs. Gable appeared before me, emerging not from a house, but from the swirling, now faintly luminous mist itself. Her usual calm was tinged with something new, attention, perhaps even a hint of desperation, her ageless eyes fixed on the damaged townhouse. The storm raged around her, yet she seemed almost a part of it, her gray silk gown swirling like the mist itself. "You see too much, Evelyn," she said, her voice barely audible above the wind, yet carrying a chilling clarity. "Some veils are best left unlifted. Some truths offer no comfort, only a deeper understanding of the cage. What is this place?" I demanded, my voice raw, shouting to be heard over the tempest. "What are you? Are you its prisoner too, or its keeper?" I held up the mother-of-pearl button, its faint glow now visible even in the storm-racked dimness. "This button, it reacts to this street. It belonged to someone you took, didn't it?" My accusation hung in the air, buffeted by the wind. Mrs. Gable's expression was a mixture of sorrow and a profound, ancient weariness. "This lane," she sighed, the sound almost lost in the storm, "is a place of echoes, yes, but it is also a confluence, a thinning of the worlds, where desires take root and grow, fed by the rain of longing. It has always been here, in one form or another, long before your city was built. It draws those whose hearts are open to its call." Her words painted the street as something primeval, almost elemental. "And you?" I pressed. "What is your part in this?" She looked at the pulsating, damaged townhouse. "I am of the lane, as it is of me. A shepherdess of lost dreams, perhaps. Or simply its oldest resident, bound to its cycles. I offer what it demands, a welcome, a reflection. The rest is up to the dreamer." Her ambiguity was still present, but now it felt less like gentle misdirection and more like a statement of grim, unavoidable fact. "It feeds on them," I stated, the horrifying truth solidifying. "It doesn't just reflect their dreams, it consumes them, leaves them as empty shells, their memories mere trinkets in your collection." Mrs. Gable did not deny it. "Desire is a powerful sustenance, child, an unfulfilled desire even more so. The street offers an end to that raw hunger, a perfect, eternal moment. For some that is a mercy." Her perspective was chillingly detached, almost alien. The mother-of-pearl button was now throbbing with a distinct rhythmic pulse, its warmth spreading through my hand. It felt like it was trying to tell me something, to show me something. I looked from the button to the damaged townhouse, its exposed, pulsating core a beacon of unnatural energy. Could this be the way? Could an object born of the street, imbued with the lost essence of one of its victims, somehow disrupt its parasitic hold? The button, I said, my voice gaining a desperate strength. It came from here. It holds a memory, a truth that isn't an illusion. What if the street is shown a memory it cannot consume, a reality it cannot twist? Mrs. Gable's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. A dangerous thought, child. To confront the heart with its own reflection. The consequences are unpredictable. It could unravel everything, including you. Her warning was stark, yet within it, I sensed a sliver of possibility, a desperate gamble. If Sparrowood Lane was a construct of desire and illusion, then perhaps a pure, untainted memory, a fragment of genuine, selfless love or profound, unvarnished truth, could act as a discordant note in its carefully orchestrated symphony of deception. The child's weeping from the blue house, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief and lost love, suddenly seemed like a key. My plan began to form, terrifying in its simplicity, its potential for self-destruction. I had to reach that pulsating core I had glimpsed, the heart of the street's illusion. And I had to present it with something it couldn't assimilate, something that would challenge its very nature. The button was one piece, perhaps, but the weeping child, that felt like the epicenter of the street's current emotional focus, its most potent lure for me. The blue house, I said, more to myself than to Mrs. Gable. The weeping child. Is that sorrow real, or just another lure? Mrs. Gable's expression became unreadable. All sorrows are real to those who feel them, Evelyn, and all lures are effective if the bait is perfectly chosen. Her words offered no clarity, only a further tightening of the web. But my resolve was hardening. I would go to the blue house. I would confront that sorrow, not as a victim, but as a conduit. And I would use whatever strength, whatever truth I had gleaned from my own painful self-reflection, and perhaps the resonant power of the mother-of-pearl button, to try and unmask the illusion at its very source. It was a desperate, reckless plan, with no guarantee of success, and a very high probability of my own absorption into the street's hungry void. The storm raged around me, the wind and rain a chaotic chorus, as if the street itself sensed my defiant intent and was marshaling its forces. The pulsating core of the damaged townhouse throbbed faster, its sickly light intensifying. Mrs. Gable watched me, her ancient eyes holding a mixture of pity, warning, and a strange, almost imperceptible flicker of something else. Anticipation, or perhaps a desperate, unspoken hope of her own. If you intend to challenge the lane, Evelyn, she said softly, her voice barely a breath against the tempest, know this. It will show you your deepest fear, and then it will offer you your most perfect dream. To survive, you must distinguish one from the other, and then somehow choose neither. Her final words were both a dire warning and the most concrete piece of guidance she had yet offered. I clutched the mother-of-pearl button, its warmth a small, defiant spark against the storm's fury and the street's chilling power. My fear was immense, a cold, coiling serpent in my gut. But beneath it lay a fragile, newly forged determination. I would not be a passive victim. I would not be another lost trinket. I would unmask the mist, or be consumed in the attempt. With a final steadying breath, I turned away from Mrs. Gable and the exposed, throbbing heart of the damaged townhouse, and began to walk, with as much courage as I could muster, back towards the faded blue house, towards the sound of the weeping child, towards the very core of Sparrowood Lane's most personal, most potent illusion, ready to face whatever horrors or whatever desperate truths lay hidden within. The walk back to the faded blue house was a battle against the raging storm and my own surging fear. Each flash of lightning illuminated Sparrowood Lane in stark skeletal relief, the houses seeming to lean in, their windows like hungry eyes. Mrs. Gable's final warning, distinguish fear from dream, then choose neither, echoed in my mind, a cryptic mantra against the tempest. I clutched the mother-of-pearl button, its steady warmth a small point of focus in the overwhelming chaos. Reaching the blue house, I found its door still slightly ajar, the sound of the child's inconsolable weeping spilling out, a raw, heartbreaking lament that seemed to be the very soul of this street's sorrow. This time, there was no hesitation. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, not as a curious explorer, but as someone with a desperate, fragile purpose. The scent of apples and lavender was cloying, the spinet music a discordant, mournful dirge. The house was darker now, the inviting warmth I'd felt before replaced by a profound, bone-chilling cold. The weeping drew me upwards, towards the shadowy landing at the top of the gracefully curving staircase. As I ascended, the illusions of comfort and domesticity seemed to shimmer and fade, the beautiful wallpaper peeling to reveal damp, bare plaster beneath, the polished wood dull and decaying. The house was showing its true, desolate heart, or perhaps my resolve was stripping away its disguise. On the landing, in the dimmest, coldest corner, I found it, not a child, but a small, exquisitely dressed porcelain doll, its painted face streaked with what looked like real tears, its tiny body trembling almost imperceptibly. From this doll, this focal point of concentrated sorrow, the heartbreaking sobs emanated. It was the core of this particular illusion, a powerful psychic, echo of a lost child, a lost love, designed to ensnare the compassionate, the grieving. Mrs. Gable's perfect bait. Recalling her words, choose neither, I didn't try to comfort the doll, nor did I succumb to the overwhelming grief it projected. Instead, holding the warm mother-of-pearl button aloft like a tiny shield, I spoke to the sorrow itself, my voice clear and steady despite the tremor in my heart. I spoke not of illusion or entrapment, but of acknowledgement, of the validity of its pain, but also of the necessity of release, of the world beyond this self-perpetuating grief. I offered not a solution to its dream, but a truth beyond it. I spoke. The button in my hand began to glow with an intense, pure white light, a light that seemed to push back against the house's oppressive shadows. The weeping from the doll faltered, the sobs catching in its porcelain throat. The air in the house thrummed with a powerful, unseen energy, a discordant shriek that was not of sorrow, but of resistance, of something ancient and parasitic being, denied its expected nourishment, its anticipated victim. Then, the blue house began to shake violently. The spinet music screeched to a discordant halt. Cracks appeared in the walls, the scent of apples and lavender turning acrid, like burning sugar. The illusion was shattering. The entire street outside seemed to groan in response, a chorus of anguished howls as the foundations of its deceptions were challenged. The storm outside redoubled its fury. lightning splitting the sky, thunder shaking the very earth. I knew I had to leave now. The doll lay silent, its tear-streaked face serene. The weeping finally stilled. Whether it was freed or simply quiescent, I couldn't know. Turning, I fled down the collapsing staircase, the house groaning and splintering around me, chunks of plaster falling, the beautiful floral wallpaper tearing away to reveal nothing but a swirling, empty void where solid walls had been. Sparrowood Lane was unmaking itself. Back on the cobblestones, the scene was one of utter chaos. The mist swirled with a furious, disorienting energy, no longer luminous but a dark, angry gray. The charming facades of the other houses were flickering, distorting, some crumbling into dust, others simply fading like watercolors in a downpour. The very ground beneath my feet felt unstable, the cobblestones shifting like loose teeth. The air was filled with the sound of shattering illusions and the mournful sighs of countless dissolving dreams. Mrs. Gable stood amidst it all, near the exposed, pulsating core of the damaged townhouse I had seen earlier. She was no longer serene, but her form was becoming translucent, her edges blurring into the chaotic mist. She looked directly at me, her agate eyes filled with a profound, almost unreadable expression. Was it anger? Regret? Or simply the weariness of an ancient entity facing its own dissolution? She gave a single, slow nod, then began to fade, her form unraveling like smoke. The exit, the corner of Oakhaven Square, seemed impossibly far, the street a maelstrom of collapsing realities and swirling angry fog. The mother of pearl button was still warm in my hand, a small guiding light. I ran, stumbling over shifting cobblestones, buffeted by the wind, the shrieks of the vanishing street echoing around me. The air grew colder, cleaner, the metallic tang of the fog replaced by the familiar scent of wet city stone. With a final, desperate lunge, I threw myself around the corner, collapsing onto the solid, reassuringly mundane pavement of Oakhaven Square. I lay there, gasping, drenched by a now ordinary, steady rain, the kind that simply washed the city clean. Behind me, where Sparrowood Lane had been, there was only the familiar, solid wall of the old bakery, its windows dark. The scent of yeast and yesterday's bread, a comforting anchor to reality. Sparrowood Lane was gone, vanished as completely as if it had never existed, leaving no trace, no scar on the city's familiar face. The dense, unnatural fog had lifted, dispersed by the cleansing rain and the first, faint hints of a distant, ordinary dawn breaking through the bruised and battered clouds. The silence that descended was not the preternatural hush of the phantom street, but the weary quiet of a city after a long, hard storm. I slowly got to my feet, trembling, every muscle aching. In my hand, I still clutched the mother-of-pearl button. It was cool now, its intricate floral carving the only tangible proof of my impossible journey. Had it all been a dream, a hallucination born of fog and my own troubled mind? The raw terror, the profound sorrow, the chilling reality of Mrs. Gable and the collection of lost things argued otherwise. The city of Oakhaven, as it awakened to a new day, seemed unchanged, its citizens oblivious to the phantom street that had briefly nested within its familiar contours, to the silent, hungry houses that had offered bespoke dreams and consumed unwary souls. But I was changed, irrevocably so. I had walked a street that did not exist, confronted its possessive allure, and somehow found my way back. The rain continued to fall, a soft, steady rhythm, washing the grime from the cobblestones, washing the lingering scent of apples and lavender from my clothes. It felt different now, no longer a trigger for a specific atmospheric dread, but simply rain. Yet, I knew that every time a deep fog rolled in from the river, every time the city lights blurred into an uncertain haze, a part of me would search the familiar corners, wondering if another lost lane might momentarily emerge from the mist. The memory of Sparrowood Lane, of its silent sparrows, its weeping doll, and its curator of lost dreams would remain, a chilling, indelible echo. It was a reminder that some mysteries are woven into the very fabric of the world, hidden just beyond the veil of the ordinary, waiting for a receptive heart, or a soul a little lost, to stumble upon their perilous, alluring thresholds. I looked at the mother-of-pearl button one last time, then slipped it deep into my pocket. It was a secret I would carry, a silent testament to the night I had unmasked the mist. The experience had not given me easy answers, nor a perfect, unblemished peace, but it had given me something far more valuable, a hard-won understanding of my own resilience, and a profound respect for the hidden sorrows and the quiet, desperate longings that shape the unseen landscapes of the human heart. The dawn was breaking fully now, a fragile, ordinary light spreading over Oakhaven. My own path forward felt uncertain, yet somehow clearer. I had faced the allure of a perfect, illusory escape, and chosen the difficult, imperfect reality. And in that choice, perhaps, lay the truest form of return, the most authentic way home. The mystery of Sparrowood Lane was over, but its echoes, I knew, would linger for a lifetime. The fog still rolls from Oakhaven's deep-boned stone, and rain still whispers where the alleyways hide. But Sparrowood Lane now sleeps, unfelt, unknown, save for the button kept close by my side. Its pearly gleam, a tiny captured moon, reminds me of a street that breathed and yearned, that offered solace in a whispered rune, and lessons in the silence I had learned. No cobblestones now echo with my dread. No spinet plays its melancholy tune. The blue house slumbers with its sorrows, shed beneath an ordinary afternoon. Yet, when the mist hangs heavy, soft and gray, and city lights are halos in the haze, I feel the pull of what has slipped away, the phantom threshold of those other days. The weeping doll, her painted tears now dry, the artist's plea, the curator's strange grace. They live within the archive of my eye, each fragile ghost assigned its proper place. For I have walked where dreams are given breath, and seen the hunger in their fragile core, have known the quiet compromise of death, and chosen life, though shadows may endure. So let the city keep its hidden lanes, its fleeting glimpses of what might have been. My heart holds maps of joys and spectral pains, a landscape altered from the world within. And I, the Archivist of Air and Mist, will walk these streets, aware of every sign, the phantom doorways that I now resist, my own true path at last uniquely mine.